what I do is start with a little bit of an overview of the actual subjects that take part, that are part of contemporary art, because they are quite different from the ones that you've already been discussing in design. Now, contemporary art is obviously looking at and learning about art in the contemporary world. And contemporary means now. It means the world that we live in today. But it is informed by modern art, which is art of the 20th century, and art before that, and art from all over the world. And we don't just look at art making and training to be an artist, but we look at the whole art world and all the different parts of it, from galleries, museums, auction houses, the selling of art, and how art dovetails with a whole lot of other different areas of life. And in fact, many people would argue that you can make art about anything, and you can make art with anything, which means that art is really about the whole world. So we do a lot of looking at the world, talking about the world, and keeping up with the world as it's changing. And wow, we've had a year of that. Okay, so I'll just look at some of the subjects. In contemporary art, you also do contextual studies and academic skills. Academic skills is only in the first year, and I'm sure you've looked at this a little bit already today. And those are essentially kind of learning to read, write, and speak about art and about culture in general. And they're very, very important for the contemporary art degree, because they completely weave into ways in which you will think about the world and you'll think about art history. And they directly relate to our big main subject, which is studio practice. And studio practice is what it sounds like. It's how you practice, how you make, but also broadly how you learn about art through the idea of what a studio is, what making is, and it covers lots and lots of different things. So I just put together this slide. It's very busy, so you don't need to read everything, and I'll just pull some of the things out. So in studio practice, which is the sort of biggest bulk of your subjects throughout the 3 years of your degree, we do a lot of traditional mediums, and we don't just learn how to do those mediums, but we also learn about their history, about their significance, about other people who are, really adept at that, famous artists who've worked in those mediums, contemporary artists, local artists, African artists, South African artists. And those are things like, obviously, the more traditional mediums, painting, sculpture, drawing, and so forth. But we also do a lot of more contemporary mediums like installation, digital art, video and film, performance, intervention, etc., etc. And if some of these words are words that you don't recognize, well, don't worry, that's our job, to inform you and teach you. And I always say to first-year students when they come in, if you think about wanting to study medicine or wanting to study architecture, you're not expected to know how to fix and heal someone before you start studying medicine. And you're also not expected to know how to build a house or design a house and understand the kind of engineering and physics and all those kind of things before you study architecture. And in the same way, I encourage people to keep an open mind about learning about art through studying it. We expect you to want to do it, but we don't expect you to know all of these things. And that's our job, to help you understand them. So layered on top of and very connected to studio practice is another subject called technical development. Oh, before I go on to that slide, apologies. So studio practice, just to sum up, in this subject, over 3 years, you'll really grow and develop a deeper and more informed understanding of yourself as an artist in the making and your art practice within the context of the contemporary world. Okay, so layered onto that subject, it's not as big, you won't spend as much time on it, but it's very connected to studio practice, is technical development. And again, it's a subject that explains itself in the name. It's the development of your technical skills. And in this subject, which runs from the beginning of first year to the end of second year, and it's still a little bit woven into third year in studio practice, but you don't actually have it as a subject in third year, is a way of learning how to actually really do things. So it links to studio practice, but it's much more focused on the kind of learning the skills and the processes and the techniques, rather than the development of those things into a more broad understanding, which you do in studio practice. So in the subject, you learn the how-to skills, the techniques, the processes of making to support your studio practice and to support the subject of studio practice. And then connected to that is a subject that you start in second year and you do through to the end of third year. And we feel that this is a very important part, and we worked it into our curriculum when we were developing it, which is called collaborative practice. So the art world and being an artist, it's no longer this very old-fashioned stereotype of a person in their attic working away on their own. Contemporary art and the art world are very, very much about working with other people, collaborating with other people on many different levels, from actually very creative ones. And there are many, many artists that you might have heard of who work in either like couples or pairs or groups throughout history and in the contemporary world. But it's also an industry and a field that by its nature is about working with other people. If you think of how the gallery system works, how art fairs work. So we have a subject where we explore all of that. And then again, because art is about things that are in the world, we also look a lot at how societies work and how people work together more generally, and different kind of systems that feed into ideas about art. Okay. So collaborative practice, in this subject, you'll learn how how to work with other people creatively. And as we said, it's a vital skill for artists, curators, galleries, and administrators. And you'll see that in this subject, like with all the subjects, we sort of pair learning about ideas and practice and practical skills with also starting to really think from the word go into what you can do in the world after you graduate, in the broad art world. You know, many, many contemporary artists in Cape Town and in South Africa and probably in the world will work in different roles in their career. They won't only just make art. They might work in a gallery. They might collaborate with friends to put on an exhibition. They might spend some time as an intern or assistant to other artists. They might have forays into the design world or into the film industry, and so on. So a lot of these things that we try to work into that we do work into the curriculum are to really sort of help you broaden ways of thinking in very directly into your future. The last subject, which I'm sure has been mentioned already because both design students and art students do it in the art degree, it's called professional practice, but it matches up with business studies in the design, and it overlaps in some case, and you do the subject from first to third year in parts. And this is really taking a lot of things I just mentioned and kind of really solidifying them around how to be a professional artist or to work professionally in the art world. And it ranges from kind of strengthening yourself in order to be more resilient and in order to deal with the world of making something creative and showing it to other people and selling it and all those kind of things. And then it also goes into broader issues around professionalism. So in that subject, you'll learn how to work professionally in the art world and how to strengthen your self-awareness and resilience. Okay, so those are the key subjects that you do. And as I said, woven through all of this is the contextual studies degree. And I'll ask Larita to speak a little bit if we've got time to that. And then I thought, and I'll just do this very quickly because I can see it's already 20:11. I just thought I'd show you some pictures because obviously you can't visit the school today. And I'll just show you a little bit of what happens when we are not under lockdown. So this is within the first week of term of 2020. And because we're so lucky that our campus is in Woodstock, and in fact, there are many of the top galleries in South Africa that are located in Woodstock, and some of you will know about that already, such as the Stevenson Gallery, Goodman Gallery, Blank, Smack Gallery, and there used to be more. Some of them have moved to town. So we try and make sure that at least once a term, if not more, we go and we see all the art exhibitions that are happening at the moment, and we look at them and we talk about them. And you can see here, this is a group of mixed students from first to third year and the lecturers, and we've gone on a big walkabout to look at all the different exhibitions, and we're having a discussion about that particular show. So we do a lot of outings. We either go to the big museums like Zeitz, Iziko, Norville, we go to the local galleries, we go to artist studios, we go to, sometimes we go to other institutions, museums, not necessarily art museums, but other kinds of museums. And sometimes we go and look at public space and public sculptures, and we discuss those things. So outings are very, very important, and we feel that they really connect the students to the real world, to what's happening now. This is a picture of the first year studio. It's before the beginning of the year when it was just being sort of cleaned out, and it's in this beautiful industrial building. The studios might change by the time we get to 2021, but we work in a kind of space that is very reminiscent of a lot of actual real artist studios where a lot of artists work in sort of industrial areas and big spaces and make them into their studios. So that's a picture of the empty studio. And then this is the first year studio just before lockdown. Unfortunately, we had to like pause on obviously all of this, but there was a lot of activity going on in the studio. We were learning about color theory and color mixing, and you can see the students are like really occupying the whole space. So there's a lot of messy work, but then there's also a lot of clean work. There's also a lot of times where students really learn about curation, and they put on their own little tiny exhibitions throughout the whole year for our reviews, which is where they present the work to the rest of the students. So this is the second years at the end of term one, luckily before lockdown. Sorry, not at the end of term one, at the end of the first project cycle. So this is 4 weeks into the year. And the second years are presenting their work, and I'll just flick through it quickly, to the rest of the students, to the first and third year students, I think. No, this is just to the third year students. So the second years and the third years often share their work in the review. We ask people to give feedback. And you can see there's a real mixture of mediums here, from kind of sculptural work, installation work, video, sound, performance, soft sculpture. And you can see that we really encourage students to also have a lot of dialogue about art. It's very, very important that students learn how to talk about their art, how to ask questions. That's one of our lecturers, Rowan Smith. And you can see how the students have turned their studio spaces. This is another studio. This is some third year work. And you can see how students are engaging. Now, it looks like everyone's on their phones, but they're not actually on their phones just wasting time. They're actually writing feedback on each other's work. So we have discussions. We also have a lot of sessions where students are giving written feedback or writing about art, learning how to really articulate. It's a very, very important part of the art world at the moment, is learning how to read and write and talk. And writing is always difficult. So we work on it very slowly and gently and kind of really build up your skills in that way. Okay, so these are just examples of, this is in the third year studio, which is in the main building in the biscuit mill. And again, it's a whole mixture of different work. You can see installation work, found objects. There's Nazir talking to his group, photography, mixed media, lots of different things going on. And yeah, we have a very social, and I don't mean that in terms of like always fun, sometimes it's serious, but we have a very collaborative and social kind of set of classes where we often get first years, second years, and third years to work with each other. Okay, so that's just a few examples of this year's work. I'll just flick through it a little bit faster. And then this is an exhibition, an end year exhibition, which you can see a little bit more polished, where at the end of the year, definitely the third years, and definitely the first years, and sometimes the second years, put on a class exhibition, which they curate together. They do all the work, they clean the space, they learn how to work professionally together, how to display work, how to label it, how to do the promotion, how to do the installation. And again, you can see this is where they take over the studios and they transform the studio into exhibitions, and there's a visitor listening to a sound piece. So there's a lot of doing, there's a lot of making, there's a lot of working together, discussing, talking, planning, learning a whole range of different skills, and ending up with learning about actually professionally presenting, framing, hanging, displaying, naming the work. Okay, so I think that's the end. Oh, this is just some of the work that was made during lockdown. I better just quickly zoom through this. You can see it's hard to write when you're thinking about a virus. This is one of the second year's works. So even with lockdown, we were able to move with difficulty. I mean, students don't have their studios, but we've able to make a plan. So students have been very productive despite of the situation at the moment, which is really amazing. So all of this work has been made from home, displayed at home, curated at home, and shared through Google Classroom, which we're working on at the moment. This is some of the first year's work. And that's the end of the presentation. So I will return to you in a second. Okay. Hi, is everyone still there? It's always a bit difficult when there's a void. Okay, great. Okay, so we only have a minute of this session left, but I'd like to invite Nazir, because I think it's important, if there's anything he would like to add from his point of view as a student. And then if anything Larita wants to add, and Rob, please just interject if we need to obviously move to the next session. Okay, Nazir, I don't know if you wanted to join us and just switch your mic on.
Hello, I'm Nazir. This is what I look like in case you haven't yet seen me. I'm just going to keep my camera off. I fear for the connection. So, of course, I can only speak for myself as a contemporary art student, but in my 2.5 years here, I've learned a lot, practically, technically, and conceptually, as Julia said, in terms of art making and collaboration. I'm just talking about the student experience here. I've been talking to some of the other students, and we all really miss the studios too, you know, having facilities to work in. I even slept in the studios overnight at one point. But now that we're in lockdown, we've all come to appreciate having that company to discuss ideas for artworks, offer critique, etc. And I think even working after hours in the studio really cemented that bond between us as students. Yeah, there's a real trust in this class, and of course that's crucial to have in a learning environment. The lecturers, of course, are all fantastic, all very lovely and down to earth. And because the classes are very small, naturally there's more contact time between each student and the lecturer, so everyone gets enough feedback on the work they're doing. Even now in isolation, we arrange one-on-one consultations so that we can discuss ideas and progress. What else? Oh, about the CS course. Just to briefly touch on that, I don't know if Larita will add on this, but it's great because it teaches a range of various theoretical studies that can then be applied to our practice. Often the students are very inspired by the CS module they find themselves studying, and they decide to make work about that, which is fantastic if you ask me, to have access to knowledge and then being able to take that and make something wonderful from it, something that can be seen and understood by someone else, which then in turn can spark new ideas in them to invent something marvelous or overthrow a government or something. I don't know. There's so much potential. Yeah, because contemporary art is there to inspire, to create culture, you know, to provoke thought and question systems of power. Yeah, it's amazing the things you can do. I don't know if Larita would like to add a bit more onto that. Hello.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Hi. I'm Larita, one of the Contextual Studies lecturers along with Desiree, and sometimes we have Francois and other people teaching as well, such as Rowan. And we're all quite geeky. We call ourselves the nerd squad because, as Nazir said, it's great to link up the theory and theoretical ideas with real world context. So in contextual studies, we're all focused on engaging with critical debates that's currently going on in the world. We try to make links between that and then the visual world in which we find ourselves as artists and designers. So yeah, I don't know. The point of contextual studies is really to evoke critical thinking, and it's wonderful for contemporary art because it does feed in directly into your art practice. But also as designers in any kind of visual field, it's so important to think critically about what you're making visually, and that's the point of the subject, really.
Thank you, Larita, and thank you, Nazir. And just to add one last thing, is that I think I agree wholeheartedly with both of what you've said. And just to reiterate that thing, that art is really, I mean, there's many famous quotes about this, but I mean, a huge point of art in the world is to delight, but also to question. And it kind of ranges from something that should make you feel quite uncomfortable to something that should really make you feel wonderful. And the whole range is completely important. You know, we would be far worse off without kind of art and culture. And we really do try, and in many, many different ways, through looking, through watching documentaries, through talking about art, through visiting, I just really want to reiterate that it's through a whole range of different things from across all subjects that we really try and get each student to become more authentic in themselves. So what are the questions that they want to ask the world? What are the ways they want to take those questions and share visually or through movement or through text or through any medium? How do they want to, or through curating an exhibition, how do they want to take their ideas and share those ideas with the world effectively, and also receive feedback on those things, and how to be resilient to get to receive that critique as well, which is a kind of quite a difficult part of being an artist.